but somehow it never happened. And now see how they immediately find gigantic sums when they need to, for goals that are completely opposite of those humanitarian goals that they proclaimed, not to help, but to kill, not to heal, but to destroy, not to educate, but to completely disintegrate new generations. Now to G7 in Canada. It did not have the results Zelensky expected from it. First of all, they did not organize a meeting between Trump and Zelensky that he hoped for. Obviously, they did not. They could not secure the help they wanted. As you know, there was no joint statement on Ukraine, so Zelensky left without any results. But there was a good article, surprisingly, in Politico by Erhan Nuriev, who is a famous German Alexander von Humboldt member. The 17th of June, just recently, it was published in Politico. It highlights that the West will not be able to help Ukraine to win this conflict, and the victory in this war stopped being a realistic goal, regardless of how many billions the West will give Ukraine. And our president has also touched upon this yesterday. No matter how much they provide, they will not be able to achieve these mythical goals, to defeat Nazism in Ukraine, to defeat us in this conflict. And the author says that this unpopular point of view in Brussels or Washington, but even they more or less gradually start admitting that it's true. And right now, the help that is needed is to not continue this war, but to stop the war and to minimize the effort, minimize the harm. And right now, not so much depends on the arms, but on diplomacy. And I would like to add that it is common sense. I want to reiterate that this was words of the expert from Alexander von Humboldt's Foundation. We also see the struggle of the Kiev regime with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. The Kiev regime continues its struggle with it, along with forceful methods, threats of forced mobilization of representatives of the clergy have now been used for this purpose. Now they have approved a list of religious organizations that are critical for the functioning of the economy and ensuring the life of the population in a special period, and whose clergy will accordingly be entitled to a reservation from being recruited into the AAFU. It looks like they will be choosing whose crosses they like better, and will choose people with symbols of other religions who will be selected to be recruited. And those favorites will not be recruited. This has never been seen before. What country on Earth, what regime on this planet has ever conjured something like that? If we saw something like this in a film or a book, we would think that this is an absolute dystopia, absolutely impossible in real life. But this is reality already in Ukraine. there were more than 7,000 such organizations. Of course, the list includes the entirety of Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Uniats, Protestants, Evangelists, Adventists, Neo-Pagan and other communities. But not a single structure belonging to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church was on the list. In order to avoid mobilization, priests of the canonical church are offered to voluntarily transfer with their parish to the UOCU and legalize the change of jurisdiction. How can you describe this? Change your jurisdiction and then you will be immune to recruitment. However, military enlistment officers have long been approaching the clergy of the UOC, but from now on they will have a free hand and cases of forced mobilization of the clergy will occur more often. Unfortunately, there are some examples of this already. On June the 11th of this year, Archpriest Alexander Zhuk, rector of the UOC Rural Church, was detained in Rovno and has hastily sent to the unit after a military medical commission. On the same day, in the Ternopil region, military commissars seized the rector of the Pachaev Holy Spirit Monastery Skit, Archimandrite Paphnutius. These facts confirm the urgency of a special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine and eliminate threats emanating from the territory.
And another important topic I would like to mention in mass media, they speak about the involvement. I would like to speak about Sahara-Sahel region, and citing official sources, there was a statement of the involvement of Ukrainian intelligence in assisting the terrorist group for the support of Islam and Muslims, which on the 30th of May carried out an attack on the positions of the Malian armed forces in the Kulikoro region. So here we mean the supply of unmanned aerial vehicles to terrorists by the Kiev regime through the territory of one of the neighboring countries. The provision of intelligence and so on. So according to available information, during the counter-terrorist operation, the Malian defense and security forces found incriminating documents belonging to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. An unmanned aerial vehicle with identifying inscriptions in Ukrainian was also seized. And the Kiev regime continues to demonstrate its terrorist nature. Its ties with African terrorists were previously confirmed by the press secretary of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Andrei Yusuf, and the Ukrainian ambassador. They publicly stated that they had existed terrorist forces that carried out an attack on a convoy of Malian soldiers. And we can say that Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso appealed to the United Nations Security Council, demanding the measures be taken in connection with the Kiev regime's support for terrorism in Africa. And we provide updates on the information, including such information as for regular attacks on civilian infrastructure. And the second front in Africa has been apparently decided to open, and they plan to stimulate terrorist activity in African states that are friendly to us. So for a whole year since the tragedy in Mali, not a single Western power has condemned Kiev's support for terrorist groups, even when the Africans themselves pointed this out. And Also, the current reaction of the Western Bloc to the terrorist attacks committed by Ukrainian neo-Nazis in Russia also fits into the strategy of criminally covering up the proteges. All responsibility lies with the neo-Bandera regime and its Western accomplices. As you know, our ministry releases reports, thematic reports on human rights, and a lot of data is used so as to issue such reports. And your report has been issued on human rights in Ukraine. The numerous facts of human rights violations that exist confirm that the situation in Ukraine has seriously deteriorated. It is obvious that the Kiev regime, which has usurped power, is now increasingly showing its openly Nazi essence, committing countless gross violations of human rights in all spheres of public life. In Ukraine, police dictatorship has been effectively established, and legal chaos and lawlessness reign. Besides, various manifestations of neo-Nazism are growing, including aggressive propaganda of ideology, falsification of the history of the Great Patriotic War in order to glorify the Nazis and their accomplices, the cultivation of nationalist sentiments among the population. This report provides a large number of facts confirming all of this. Glorification in various ways of the Nazi criminal Bandera, the glorification of the Nazis, honoring of the few survivors. The Nazi approaches are also implemented in relation to the Russian-speaking population. At present, everything Russian is banned, and a course has been set for the elimination of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and it means its whole essence is abolished, about to be abolished. There is a large-scale campaign, an unprecedented campaign of violent seizure of churches by militants with support of local authorities. It is all underway, followed by the legalization of the results of such raiding. So there are meeting rallies, different gatherings. Before that, monuments to heroes of patriotic war and everything linked to the great victory were just taken down with the proposal that this is done for decommunization purposes, and this was sanctioned by the head of the state. So this means rewriting the whole history, and it is fantastic. It is actually unimaginable that on the one hand they do this decommunization, and on the other, in religion, they use real measures used in the worst sense under communists, when there were some exaggerated reactions concerning the clergy, concerning representatives of religions. So how does it all fit? How does it fit into one head? On the one hand, decommunization, and on the other hand, the use of very methods applied during that period, which were later considered and recognized criminal in some cases and unacceptable in some cases by the countries that were once such republics, by non-governmental organizations and by people. So this is some painful collision, a dichotomy that happens in the minds of those people. As I have already said, regularly said, there is a hunt against the clergy, against clergymen, including the mobilization of the armed forces. Moreover, the Kiev regime is already degenerating into a terrorist organization, committing numerous crimes against Russian civilians, residents of the Belgorod, Bryansk, Zaporozhye, Kursk, Kherson regions, Donetsk and Lugansk. They are all targets of the terrorist regime. It is not surprising that the use of the widest range of repressive measures against a significant number of the population is necessary for the Ukrainian administration, presidential administration, as the only and most reliable way to retain power. For them, it is important to continue the war, maintain a high degree of escalation, and ending all of this, establishing peace, will lead to the fall of the Kiev regime, to their need to explain their crimes and unfulfilled promises and even corruptions of these promises. But for them, apparently, it is more important to keep power than to have peace and to keep the lives of people. And we can see their attitude to both living people and those who are dead. It should be noted that numerous reports of terrorist and war crimes committed by Kiev regime against the civilian population of Donbass and Ukraine are not included in this report. In Russia's we can say that since 2014 there have been crimes that have been registered by the law enforcement agencies in Russia. The investigative committee of the Russian Federation, several thousand criminal cases have been opened and are under investigation. About 500 members of Ukrainian armed formations have already been sentenced to long terms of imprisonment, including life imprisonment. And Russians will. So I would like to say that I have already announced specific activity that will deal with all these questions and with the Nazi essence of the Kiev regime. So data about their crimes are included in a specific analytical material. So we have also highlighted that the obliging readiness of Zelensky to move the country along the path of self-destruction to the detriment of the interests of his own people, creating Russophobic anti-Russia project out of it. That is the reason why foreign curators turn a blind eye to the neo-Nazi essence of the Kiev regime. And history knows many similar examples of the West's connivance with openly racist regimes. The Second World War is one of the most speaking examples. But how many examples did we see after the Second World War? And another issue, the issue related to children, based on the second round of negotiations in Istanbul. Following the results of the second round, a draft statement by the chairman of the Security Council on Children in the context of the Ukrainian crisis was submitted to the United Nations Security Council for consideration at the initiative of Russia. And the document welcomed the Russian side's readiness to carefully study the list of 339 Ukrainian children handed over by Kiev who, due to various circumstances, had lost contact with their relatives and legal representatives, and to make take measures to restore family ties. It noted Russia's intention to organize the process in the most transparent manner possible. And Kiev was called upon to cooperate in good faith with the Russian side on this issue. So it seemed that everything was included in the draft. But contrary to common sense and despite the obvious humanitarian nature of the initiative, the Western members of the Security Council, UK, Greece, Denmark, Slovakia, France, South Korea, decided to effectively block the adoption of the document. They included some politicized formulations in it and record all of these things and turned the humanitarian project that was about the fate of children into some politicized story. And it was clear that, of course, no one cares about children on the side of the West anymore. And Russia had no other choice but to stop its work on this document. And this is yet another evidence of the blatant double standards of the Kiev regime's masters. who continue to spread the myths about thousands of kidnapped and forcibly displaced Ukrainian children, even when the documents handed over to us by them say the opposite. So the world has seen once again how this humanitarian topic is transforming in front of everyone's eyes just into an element of anti-Russian propaganda and Russophobia. I'm not going to go into depth about many things we have already discussed today, but it is clear, there is no doubt that no one actually really cares about children. This is all just a politicized tool. Russia has never interfered and will never interfere with the maintenance of contacts and communication of children with their relatives and loved ones. There is not a single example, example of us acting otherwise. We sincerely strive for the reunification, and there is not a single example of us interfering with this. We sincerely strive for the reunification and will continue to do so. Just an example, 5 years ago, the time of pandemic and lockdowns, our ministry and the whole country has been active in helping with moving Russian citizens, and Ukrainian citizens came to us requesting us to take them on board Russian planes to go back to their home country via Russian territory. What did they say? What do they say? And we have evidence. They went to Ukrainian diplomats, Ukrainian embassies requesting help with reaching Ukraine via Russia's assistance, and it was available at that time, while Ukrainian diplomatic missions actually denied this assistance to Ukrainian citizens, including socially underprivileged groups, vulnerable groups. So this is what all of this is about. And another example, Russia's initiative with the initiative regarding the adoption of UN Security Council resolution in connection with the terrorist attacks carried out by the Kiev regime.
Среди членов Совбеза он был распространен и построен, он был на опробированных для подобных документов формулировках. Решительно осуждались теракты, диверсии, другие акты международного терроризма, которые несут угрозу миру, безопасности на планете. Выражалось глубокое сочувствие жертвам, пострадавшим, соболезнования родственникам погибшим. Государственным членам был адресован призыв совместными усилиями привлечь к ответственности исполнителей, организаторов, спонсоров этих преступлений. Вот что могло пойти не так? И пошло не так опять, потому что западные члены Совета Безопасности ООН отказались от работы над документом, опять же под надуманным предлогом. Не буду говорить как, я думаю, что вы следили за дискуссией и вокруг этого вопроса. Российская сторона проявляла и гибкость, предложила вместо резолюции принять заявление для прессы аналогичного содержания, ну, чтобы не буксовала работа. И это начинание натолкнулось на такой же подход, на противодействие западников, которые единым фронтом выступили против. Снова себя дискредитировали, теперь уже публично показывают всем свою ангажированность. Вроде много десятилетий были против международного терроризма и терроризма как явления. Теперь все опять не видят, не замечают, не понимают. Подоплека, конечно, их очевидна. Ни у кого не вызывает сомнений, что следы бесчеловечных варварских терактов на российской территории ведут на Банковую. Европейские спонсоры укробандеровцев еще с 2014 года и закрывали глаза на любые, даже самые жестокие зверства киевской хунты. Во многих терактах непосредственно принимали участие, как, например, британцы. И сейчас используют киевский режим как свой инструментарий, ни в коем случае не отрицая террористической сути, я имею в виду не гнушаясь и не пытаясь даже как-то отмежеваться от террористических актов. Ни одного слова осуждения. Терроризму, на самом деле, не может быть никакого оправдания. И поэтому мы настоятельно призываем всех ответственных членов международного сообщества дать должную оценку произошедшему, не допускать попустительства киевскому режиму, который сделал ставку на террор. Вот ситуация в Молдавии. Внимательно следим за тем, что там происходит. Правящие элиты продолжают...
And now let's talk about the situation in Moldavia. We can see the actions of the ruling elite. We're closely following the development of the situation in Moldova. Its ruling elites continue to consistently destroy the spiritual and moral foundations of Moldovan society by forcibly imposing neoliberal values and revisionist views. And sometimes it feels that it cannot be worse. Just calling their name Romanian and describing their citizens as Romanians, only that could be worse. But no, all the time there is something even worse, and even more knocks from below the bottom of democracy. On June the 15th, we know that there was a peaceful rally in defense of traditional values in the family. What could go wrong? About 10,000 people went out to protect traditional values, and the security forces attacked an Orthodox priest. There was brutal detention of a man holding a child in his arms, and the pro-government Moldovan media turned the situation inside out and presented all of this as if the clergy themselves were trying to break through the police lines with icons in their hands. And in an official statement, the Moldovan authority claims with hypocrisy that the clashes were allegedly coordinated from the outside. And in the comments to numerous videos of this incident, viewers wrote that the brutal actions of the police demonstrate moral degradation of the authorities, the result of the politicization. And the opposition forces called the incident a planned action by the authorities to intimidate the people in the run-up to parliamentary elections, and announced the initiation of a parliamentary investigation into the actions of the Interior Ministry staff. So what was behind, what was the reason for the police violence? It's simple. On that same day, a so-called LGBT parade was held in the capital, and its participants were thoroughly protected from citizens who adhere to traditional views. Despite the ban of the municipal authority to hold this coven, the patronage of the president and the ruling party, as well as the embassies of Western countries, allowed a few local